And so, I mean, it's a great start, very entrepreneurial. You obviously had some success then, and then some failure.
Yeah.
At what point? At what point did you come up with this concept of the sacred cows, and what are they? I mean, at what point did you come up with this idea that they're when I sacred cows, I'm assuming there are things we believe,
Yep.
or society we've learned about money that you would question or think we should view differently. Um, so, what are the most important things that we should begin to reframe?
Well, I went to this event. It was a 2-day event, and this older gentleman was teaching. Probably in his 60s, and there's another young guy there, maybe like in his late 20s. I was in my very early 20s, and he kept debating the instructor. And it was winter. I remember he was in a Harley t-shirt, shorts, and flip flops, and there was snow outside. I was like, this guy's crazy. So I just started talking to him, told him about this one thing I did with my professor. He's like, that's amazing. So he's like, let's just start studying together. So we got 4 guys together. We started a study group. People hear about the study group. They start asking if they could join. Within a year, we had 170 people come to our study group. We had to rent out this auditorium at a Marriott,
Wow.
and I wasn't charging for it, but I was leading it. So I would get up and speak and teach everything I'd learned, and then what would happen is people would come up to me on the breaks and say, "Hey, do you know about this strategy, or have you ever done this?" And I'm like, "No, tell me about it." And they're like, "Well, I got an account that says what you're talking about isn't real." I'm like, "Bring him, I'll debate him." And so I just started debating these guys in front of the room, and one of the accountants ended up leaving his firm and starting to do work with us. So it was a pretty fascinating situation. And then I was like, well, I should probably make some money from this. So I started letting these advisors. I'm probably 24 at the time. If you want to come see what I'm doing, you can shadow me for a day. So they just come watch me meet with clients 5 or 6 in a day. These guys are in their 40s. They're telling the client, yeah, we're just wanting to learn from Garrett. So now the clients are definitely going to work with me because they're like, oh, this guy, really must be smart. And then I'd even run into him when I remember I went to a movie with my parents, and one of the guys came up. He's like, oh man, your son's like what Tiger Woods is to golf, he is to finance. And I'm like, who are you? What is going on here? But it was just, I was willing to freely share and be abundant enough that they started to share, and I learned at an accelerated rate. And then they'd bring me, clients, and I'd work on with them, and they'd fill up my calendar, and that was kind of where I got that start, and it all started to work out. It was just, and the guy that started this with me, his name was Les, and we started this study group on one premise. We said, let's question everything. And we're not going to try to be right. We're just going to find out what's right. So if it's bad news, it's bad news. If it's something we're doing, we're just going to own it. And so we started with a qualified plan, like a 401k, retirement plan out of the United States. And we, first 30 minutes, were like, this might be the coolest thing ever invented. We're just, everything's checking the list. And then we just start doing more analysis. We start getting real numbers from the stock market versus, projected returns. And we start running Monte Carlo simulations because I learned about those in econometrics in school. And we start seeing these plans aren't what we thought they were. And I mean, it was bad news for us because we would make tens of millions of dollars selling these things. And now we're not going to sell them. We're going to start charging a fee that people pay us to work with, which is harder than money that automatically comes out of someone's account. And so I was like, I wonder what other sacred cows are out there. So I just started saying, let's look at everything that people say, this is what you have to do, never question it. And we just started making a list.
So just to clarify there, because certainly in Ireland and Europe we don't have
Yeah.
401k. So 401k is a pension plan.
Yep.
So is the 401k something that is invested for you by an insurance company or whatever?
So no,
And
what used to be, there was pensions in America, and
yeah,
you work somewhere, you get the pension, and the company
yes,
guaranteed the pension. And then the companies were
are
taking too
investing
much
that.
risk on the pensions, and the pensions went bankrupt. So one of the answers were, well, we'll just give you a matching fund, but you are responsible for your own. So you can put money in the plan, you can invest within certain funds inside of there. If they
Yeah.
perform great, if they don't, it's on you. So it was a way to kind of push responsibility, and they were very popular at the time. And
But they weren't performing as good as just the simple stock market. Is that
well,
what you're
part of
saying?
it's because there was a bunch of fees. There was a
Yes,
there
yeah.
was
I
a
mean,
bunch
and
of fees,
so it's
and they
it's
weren't
similar over here. I mean, yeah,
right. They
yeah.
were just at the time there was no laws, so there were just these hidden fees. We found up to 13 fees that were undisclosed
Wow.
because of a firm in Seattle that was an engineering firm, and then the laws changed and all this. But even with the law changes, they just delay your tax. They don't actually save you tax. You have to pay the tax on the back end. And we're like, well, that's kind of a problem. And when we looked at the 2% fee that most of these had, it was impacting 40% of their overall return, but nobody was showing that. They were just showing, oh, the market's done 10%. And then we looked and we're like, well, the market hasn't really done 10% because some companies go out of business and then that impacts your overall return, but they put a new company in there in the index and that's not being accounted for. And volatility impacts it. If you have 100 grand, you lose 10%, you're at 90 grand, but you still have to pay your fees. So you're at less than 90 grand. If the market goes back up 10%, you're not back to 100 grand. You
Yeah.
lost the time. And so we just started to analyze that, and we were going to write a book.
And really understand what products people were buying.
Yeah. So we took 2 years of dissecting this from 2004 to
Wow.
2006. And then we had this retreat with our whole firm, and we decided what's something we could all do together. And we decided a book was going to be the answer, and the team could help us with research and they could help us with case studies and all this. And so everybody's excited. And we booked out the last 2 weeks of June of 2006. We were going to go to a hotel. We were just going to bunker. We were just going to like bunker down and just like, write the outlines and start writing the book. And then June 9th, my partner died in a plane crash.
Wow.
So he dies. I'm overwhelmed for 4 months. Just, and it wasn't just him. There was 4 partners. 2 of them died. So we lose half of our partners.
Wow.
It's a plane crash. And I'm just trying to keep it together. And then finally, 4 months later, I take my first day off. I'd worked every day since they died, and it was taking it off for Thanksgiving. And on the drive, we were driving to my family's house. It was 2 hours. My wife just is quiet, and she's driving because I'm exhausted. I put on 25 pounds over the 4 months. I can't make a simple decision. And we're halfway through the drive, and the first word she said is, you're a really great businessman. You're an extraordinary businessman. Now, I thought she's making me feel better by saying it. And I was like, oh. Then she glances at our son in the back seat, looks at me and says, but you're just an ordinary husband and father. And
That hits.
I was quiet, man. I looked away, kind of got emotional, had to like swallow to choke back the tears. And by the time we got there, I was like, all right, I'm in an office from home. I'm going to spend one more week at the office and let them know, like, hey, I'm not coming in for any of the month of December. I'm just going to be at home. If we got to do what we got to do. You guys are going to have to figure it out. I can't keep doing this. It's not healthy. I've got to focus on my family. And so I took some time to play with my son and, hang out. And what would happen is he'd take a nap. My wife would take a nap and I would be like, oh, maybe I'll start that book. And so I just started writing. I called one of our clients. His name's Steven, and he'd been through everything we'd ever done. And he's much more well-read than I am. And, he had written a little bit. And I was like, hey, I'm kind of scared to write. Like, I just don't know if I'm a good writer. Would you help me with this book? And so I hired him, and we just started talking. We started writing that book that month. And the crazy thing is we wrote the outline of the book in December and I'd kind of been writing for 2 years. I got 72 pages done in 2 years because I just could never find the time and didn't have enough purpose behind it. And then all of a sudden, by just taking care of myself and having more energy and, it just got excited and wrote it. And we probably had like 17 myths that we thought were valid, and then we combined it into 9, because some of them were enough related that we said, here's the 9 myths, and wrote the book. And it came out August of 2008, right when this great recession's happening. So the book took off because it was like prolific in saying everything that was going on and what to do differently. And so it really had kind of a life of its own and hit New York Times and as the first book. And I rewrote it in 2023, and I still can't believe I wrote that in my early 20s. It's like it holds true. I've given it out to 23 billionaires over time. I've had one of them tell me it changed how they invest. I mean, but it also wasn't written for them. It was written for people like my family that just didn't know anything about money, And I was like, hey, this is what we're being told, but here's what I saw the wealthy do that we can all apply. There's some things wealthy do that people can't just go apply, but there's other things that we could do that will help us to get wealthier by just understanding what we've been told.
So what are the simple things that the wealthy do that the average person can do?
So the first thing is it begins with our mindset. Like the wealthy don't look at the world in a finite pie zero sum game. Yet a lot of the people that are poor and middle class think if one person gets something, that's less for another. So they get in a mindset of take what you can, hold on to what you've got. They play not to lose. So it's not a game of value creation. It's a game of like preservation and protection at the expense of production. So by simply changing how they view is that dollars follow value. So you've got to learn how to create more value, which means you're worthy of investing in yourself to increase your skills and then you increase the skills that matter. Communication, those are important skills. Financial IQ, those are important skills. And a lot of people think, well, when I'm done with school, I'm done with school. But like, no,
Mm.
that's just like you're at the starting line. And what
The
you do from
starting
there
point, yeah.
really matters a lot. And it's everything from emotional intelligence, it's building relationships, it's, and so once I saw that,
All that non-financial stuff, in fact, is what you're talking about. Is the ground rock to building the wealth.
right? Because I'll post videos about billionaires and I just get hate. People like billionaires shouldn't exist. And I said, well, what happens if someone creates $10 of value for an individual, but they
Mm.
only charge them a dollar? And they do that for a billion people. So they make $1 billion. We shouldn't allow them to do that. I mean, but they think so scarcely that they've taken too much. And it's kind of like when the printing press came out. Back in the 15th century, Gutenberg comes out with it, and people are like, we can't do this. Too many jobs will be lost. This will destroy the world. And the reality is, it democratized it. It made it accessible and available that knowledge, just like there's plenty of problems with having a smartphone. But one of the things that happen is more people have access to information. So they have, unfortunately, not always the best information, but they do have access to information. And it's made it where it's not so expensive. So these are the things that the wealthy understand is like the more value I create for someone, the more people I reach, the bigger the impact, the more dollars come. People that are poor middle class, they think time equals money and they trade their time for dollars and they never learn how to make those dollars work for them. And therefore, they're in a very limited, finite game where they think I'll just budget my way and I'll reduce my expense. But guess what? Wealthy people increase productive expenses. They hire people.
Mm.
They have a team. They invest in themselves, they grow their skill sets, they do those things where the poor and middle class think there's not enough to do that, not enough to go around. So they stay stuck in their mindset and in their ability, therefore limiting their wealth.
Yeah, this notion I can see now as you're talking about this notion of scarcity leads into so many things and how people live their lives. I know one things you talk about is living a rich life. I'd like you to explain that, but I'm imagining already that from your own life lessons, the rich life is not just about wealth; it's about looking at how wealth impacts in all areas of your life, or how you live every area of your life richly. Is that what you mean by that?
Totally. And I think that there's really 5 key areas for that. One is I think money is important. People that say that it's unimportant probably don't have much of it. Who needs unimportant things laying around? The
Yeah.
second thing, though, is purpose. And I think we're at a stage of life that if people don't find purpose, they're going to be especially afraid and especially terrified with AI because lack of purpose is very exhausting. It's very concerning. It's very boring. There's a lot of problems with it. The other thing is mindset. That's part of our wealth and living richly is that we can be
Mm.
abundant. We can have peace of mind, the things that you described early on. The next is our health. We've seen, especially like in America, man, it's like I saw stats that Americans are fatter than pigs now. Pigs are 15 to 20% body fat. It's like
Wow.
it's more like 25 to 40% average body fat here in America because they say they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge. I mean, look, to be really healthy, I had to learn. I had to learn what types of foods are healthy. I had to learn
Mm.
what types of activities are good, including getting some sun, moving my body, and having some resistance training,
Mm.
getting enough sleep, letting go of stress and finding processes to handle stress so I don't internalize it and have that become an unhealthy situation, and having quality relationships. So that's the fifth thing is social life. Like some people think that they get addicted to the grind and then they don't relax and rejuvenate. When my partners died, I was exhausted and I was less productive, spending more time getting less done. So, if you don't have an ability to have relaxation, rejuvenation, or recreation, then what happens is everything gets stifled creativity, productivity, enjoyment. And so, all 5 of those things are part of our rich life. It doesn't mean all 5 are perfect, it just means that we're intentional about it and that we have depth. It means we have choice. We write the script. We don't let the world write the script because the world will just tell you more is better and you can never have enough. And that lie keeps people in dissonance so that they are enslaved to their work, they're enslaved to their career, they're enslaved to their money, and they don't have freedom.
One of my inspirations for starting this podcast and calling it the Inner Entrepreneur was because I mix with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I came across this very common theme of so many of them who are successful, who had built businesses, but had either messed up a lot of other areas of their lives or just were unfulfilled. And so their marriage, their relationship with their partner wasn't great, or the relationship with their children, or their health, or and it's like they'd focused on the area that is measurable, that everyone goes, oh, Garrett's wealthy because he has this number. Go, well, yeah, but let's look at all these other areas. And so you end up having these people we define as wealthy, but they're miserable human beings.
Yeah.
And I think that's enormously common.
Well, let me contrast two times in my life. Let's go back to July 3rd, 2006. I had gotten up in the morning, rode my bike to the gym, listened to this program by Joe Polish, and while I was at the gym, I got a text. Someone said, "Hey, I just sent Joe your book. He wants to talk to you." That's pretty cool. At the same time, before I got on the phone with him that day, I had to send $92,000 to Plan Television Arts, which is the PR firm for my book, which left me with minimal amount in my bank account because I had just been going through it on the real estate side. I'd had my first down year in business and it was really hemorrhaging. And so at the same time, later that day, we went to a barbecue with some friends. I was in the pool swimming with my kids, eating healthy food, felt really good. That night was with my family, watching fireworks and all these kind of things, staying at this little cabin. And so I thought about all the friends I had that day and had reached out to them and, just had some gratitude. So I had all these things going on in my life other than my finances. My finances were in dire situation,
Mm.
but I was launching Killing Sacred Cows. It was coming out in 2 months. These guys had the self-published version that I'd come out with the year before. And Joe helped me with 3 amazing relationships on the call that day. It was just like, I'm like, man, the financial piece isn't all the way there, but I feel really fulfilled and I feel really hopeful because I'm so on purpose and I know I've made some mistakes. I'm going to own those mistakes. I'm going to teach other people about these mistakes. Now in 2023, I just come off 2022 being a pretty fantastic year. I'd filmed a comedy special around money. I'd edited it with Marty Callner, who he brought in an editor that had won 2 Emmys that helped us out, one with Justin Timberlake, one with Chris Rock. Uh, you know, I don't know how many Emmys and Ace Awards and everything Marty had, but it's somewhere in the 30s. I mean, he did the first music video ever. I mean, he's some of the most epic videos we've ever watched, whether it was Cher's video where she was on the battleship, with
Right.
her butt hanging out. That was his video. Whether it was Tanya Katane dancing on a car for Whitesnake, that was his video. He had done Jerry Seinfeld. He won an Emmy with him. I mean, like I'm sitting here with one of the greats, and I'm a rookie comedian, and
Yeah.
it was an amazing year. But then in 2023, I was like, I don't want to be a traveling comedian, and I'd sold my business, and I was in stage 4 kidney failure. So my bank accounts were full. Sold the business, everything's going well, but my health isn't there. I was really scared, depressed, in scarcity. So I had all the financial wherewithal, but I was missing the other pieces. I would rather be where I was in 2006 than where I was in 2023. The good news is my kidneys are doing well now. I love what I'm doing in my business, but it was a bit of a dip because I had insomnia, which you don't think clearly, or I didn't when I was like, am I going to die? Am I going to get a kidney transplant? It was just a dark place because I didn't have those other areas. My mindset was being impacted. I wasn't being very social because I didn't want to bring people down because I was trying to figure this out. My mindset, just all that. Like my purpose was limited. But now here we are in 2025. I've never been happier with my business. And it took getting through that dark time. It took really thinking about what I want to do for a living and what
Mm.
was the next chapter for me. And so it ebbs and flows, but just having money doesn't mean you have happiness. I do think it's really good at renting happiness. Like taking a trip is fun while you're on the trip. I think buying a new car is fun and then it wears off. I think, there's just certain things that it can rent, but for sustained happiness, I think it's finance, purpose, mindset, health, and it's also your social life. And if you can have quality in those 5 areas, even though there might be times where some are greater than others, then that's living a rich life. It's intentional. You write the script, you design the life, you create the life you don't want to retire from.
I think the greatest gift I experience from money is freedom, and it's the most valuable gift I have is to get up in the morning and go, what will I do today, as opposed to this is what I have to do today.
Get to versus
And
have to, right? That's such a different place.
it's it's just a different place to live from, and when you live there for a while, you would, no amount of money would make me return to a place where I didn't have that level of freedom. And I think that that degree of financial freedom, for some people, it doesn't require a huge amount of wealth. It requires you to think about what requires you to think about how you want to live your life. Um, I'd love you to. I know we're running out of time, and there's so much I could talk to you about. But I've heard you often tell the story of the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. Is it?
Yes.
So I just think that's such a great story and tells us so much about building wealth. Have you the time to share that story with us?
That the Vanderbilts, I mean, they were so wealthy when they just kept expanding their transportation empire that when Cornelius died, he passed on his money to his eldest son, who doubled the estate in 9 years, which meant they had more money than the US Treasury.
Incredible.
But that was the last time their wealth grew. It decimated and went to nothing. The last Vanderbilt family reunion is rumored to have no millionaires. Yes, there's Vanderbilt University, which they donated $1 million. And part of it's because Cornelius lived a pretty frugal life when you consider the amount of wealth he had. His heirs did not. They didn't have really a trust. They didn't have an infrastructure. So they built 10 mansions in Manhattan that don't exist there anymore. They used to own the breakers in Rhode Island. They don't. The Biltmore Estates in the Carolinas, those are all gone. They're not part of the Vanderbilt family stewardship any longer. And it's because they didn't really have any framework. And so they became really good at spending money, but not much else. Where if we contrast that with the Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller, I mean, he's on now his sixth generation of passing on wealth. And it's because they set up trusts. And no one was just entitled to money in the trust. You had to be a productive member of society. And there's a lot of darkness if you read about the Rockefellers. I'm talking just financial structure here.
But there is in every generation.
I mean, they had a vice president of the United States. They had three senators. They had a president of Chase Bank. I mean, they've had some substantial influence and production. And so, they still have over $10 billion.
But it seems like so the word that jumped out there, probably the most important word here, is entitled. And I think that is the key thing, because the Vanderbilts became entitled to their wealth, and so they were no longer taking responsibility for caring for it or creating it. And if you're not caring for and creating wealth, and you don't value it, and you're only spending it, it will disappear.
They were
There's
given
just no
this
question
amazing
about that.
garden, and all they did was eat from it, and they didn't care for it. The weeds
They
grew,
didn't
everything is gone.
replant. Yes.
Where the Rockefellers, I mean, they had trusts, and they also bought life insurance so that every time someone was in their family had life insurance, so when they die, it helps replenish the trust. And they could use money from the trust, but they could pay it back and pay interest to their family, not to a bank. There's certain things, and then they looked at their family as an ongoing concern, like a religion or a business considers itself an ongoing concern. They have succession planning. They have symbols. They have rituals. They have traditions. These were all core things that the Rockefellers look at. They look at everybody that's in the Rockefeller family as an asset of the family. That's not only an asset because they're a human being with intrinsic value, but they're an asset as a potential person to come in and produce to grow that family's wealth over time. The Vanderbilts never had that conversation, although Cornelius was rumored to say, keep the money together as one of his last words. Well, they didn't keep the money together. They didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't have family retreats. They didn't create stewardship. They created an entitlement. An entitlement destroys wealth.
There's no doubt about that. I've witnessed that. Do you think that every family needs some? Well, I suppose what I'm thinking is you don't have to be the Rockefellers
Right.
to pass on values to your children, which is fundamentally what it comes down to, because you grew up in a situation where you had to create wealth yourself. Possibly your children will grow up in a situation where they might not have to if you allowed them, but most people I come across who have wealth go use it maybe to educate the children, and then go, okay, off you go, do your own thing now, because they know that's what really serves their children, as opposed to giving them money.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend, Chris. Chris Smith says, "Hey, I give my kids what they need, but they have to pay for 50% of what they want, so they earn part of it." You know, and it's like, yeah, that's really smart. I love that. And I have another mentor, Rich Christensen, that created a thing called Legato, and it was all about the family retreat structure. He's raised five amazing children. They started businesses while they were teenagers. They had
Mm.
private victories where they hiked Mount Kilimanjaro as a family so that they would build confidence, not arrogance. And they had conversations around unconditional love when they were 8 years old. There's certain methodologies that people could employ. And if people get what the Rockefellers do, there's an entire legacy toolkit that helps them with the building blocks of legacy, which is, I believe, having a family constitution, which is what are the values that we want to pass down? What are the contributions we want people to make? But most importantly, what are the lessons that we learn so we don't have to repeat all the same mistakes? So everybody's
Yes.
just starting over. And, I'm still thinking through legacy. I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, and, we're having conversations on a regular basis. I love it. They take half of their income, they put it into Bitcoin. So
Mm.
I just like that they're thinking that way. And, I want them to find their own lives and careers. But if they want to be part of the business that I've started, I'm more than willing to have them be part of that business because I've taught them to be contributors. They're kind kids. My son's out digging holes in the yard right now with my father-in-law, because we just finished our yard and we're putting in a few extra little bells and whistles, and he'll learn that's not the hard work that he wants to do, but he's willing to do, right? So there's just lessons along the way. Every quarter we take a trip as a family where we have conversations in the car ride,
Mm.
or we fly somewhere that's not too far away and we have a little retreat. We do family meetings. We have
Mm.
conversations about, we have a family crest. We had family rituals when they were young. When they start the day, what are they grateful for? What's the intent for the day? What beliefs do they want to reinforce? At night, my wife would say, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? What did you learn? And so it's just, these rituals make a big difference because it's how we invest in our heirs.
Well, these rituals are how you're passing on values to your children, and what you said about your kids there to me is that they're contributors, and bringing your children into your family business or into your wealth or whatever, as long as they're contributing, because I think if they don't contribute, you end up like the Vanderbilts and losing it, but also contribution gives you self-esteem and self-worth, and then they begin to realize, oh, I've learned from my dad and now I can go and do it myself, which is a whole different ball game than going, I'm living off my dad, because that just destroys your
Right. My
self-esteem.
youngest
Yeah.
son